All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Quinn Tabor Show. I am excited to delve into maybe the most pertinent topic of the last 2 weeks, which is all about immigration. If you're like me, you've been glued to your TV or your phone, seeing the ICE raids in Minneapolis, the pushback from a lot of kind of the local citizens, the shooting of Renee Good, and of all of the thoughts that go through my mind, and there are many. This is coming from someone that devoted 3 years of their life to support refugees in the Middle East and cares deeply about our immigrant population in the U.S. But perhaps the thing that I find most jarring is that myself, and if you surveyed 10 of my friends, if we watched the same video, how we interpret it really falls along party lines. And that immigration is such a hot button issue that it just increasingly is feeling like both sides are maybe a little bit detached from reality or the data. And I know when I have friends that I get it, kind of have this visceral response, especially from maybe clips that they're getting on their algorithm. And it's easy for me to do the okay, you're saying that immigrants are committing crimes. It's like, oh, well, I look at the data. They're 2.5 times less likely. There's 60% less immigrants incarcerated on a per capita basis. And I'm like, oh, I know the data. I'd love to tell you about it. I like data. Immigrants are stealing our houses and driving housing prices up. Oh, no, it's the immigrant population that's disproportionately working in the construction industry and actually driving down your and my housing costs by 15 to 30 grand. They're stealing our jobs. There's data pointing in the different direction. So I am quick to also cite things that might feel a little partisan. So what I'm actually going to do is try to take a different tack, and that is to exclusively litigate the economic and pocketbook issues from the lens of immigration, and ask you and I if we're laser focused on helping you, me, and our peers around us to achieve the American dream. How does immigration factor into that? Let's keep it really brass tacks. I'm going to skip hopefully anything that feels hyper-partisan and just make the case with economics and really drive the point home that there's actually there's a clear and unanimous body of evidence that immigrants help you and me achieve the American dream. But man, already it's like, Quinn, that's partisan. Got it. Okay, here comes the economic student in me that's ready to throw down and just take you through, once again, not my lived reality and my experience with immigration, because I could tell you some really poignant stories, but instead say the starting line. Something that's kind of cited frequently is that immigrants, and definitely the kids of immigrants, so the second generation, are 2 to 3 times more likely to be entrepreneurial and start a business and be a net job creator, meaning for the jobs that they take or the jobs that they give to fellow immigrants, that they are disproportionately, for each immigrant, creating more jobs for natural born citizens by a rate of 2 to 3 times. You zoom out and look at the Fortune 500, especially in the technology sector. Immigrants are 3 times more likely to have founded a Fortune 500 company, and in the process, create, if you're just looking at big tech, disproportionately, like the 18 million jobs just amongst the kind of the big tech players in that Fortune 500 list. That is a huge multiplier where a handful of immigrants didn't create 10 jobs per person. We're talking the tune of hundreds of thousands each. I think you then generalize that out, and instead of looking kind of at the unit basis and ask the question, is there a case that immigrants are actually a drain on things like our federal deficit and just like our GDP growth rate in general? Just in this decade, the 2020s, immigrants are on track already in 5.5, 6 years to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion by paying into the government more than they take out. That alone, I'm like, whoa, I'm looking at our deficit. $1 trillion is really material. And that shows up in a couple interesting ways. Same thing. I'm going to try to avoid anything that feels really like blanketed and like painfully partisan. But man, in a lot of the ways that the one big beautiful bill was litigated, it was around, well, immigrants clearly must be a drain on Medicaid and Medicare, and we need to cut out that waste, fraud, and abuse. The data from this decade is that per year, amongst undocumented immigrants, per year, pay into Social Security about $13 billion and pay into Medicare and Medicaid $3 billion. And the nature of being undocumented means that they can't actually then draw from those Social Security and Medicaid trust funds. All they're allowed to do is pay into it. Kind of the next key lever, this is one that I'll drive towards when I get to kind of my solutioning, is that then you look at any of the high-skilled, legal immigrant, someone that works in STEM, science, technology, engineering, that kind of individual, on average, if they come to the U.S. in their 20s or 30s, is actually a net payee into the government's coffers north of $1 million, meaning they contribute to the federal balance sheet $1 million more than they draw down over their lifetime. $1 million. I think the element that's still maybe ringing in your mind is like, well, Quinn, there's no way. If the government reports that there's about 11 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S., Republicans say the number is bigger than that. There's no way that they aren't taking our jobs. This is where I'm going to take on like kind of increasingly heady concepts here that it's a little bit of a like Econ 101, but it is that one of the first things they teach you in macroeconomics is that a nation's job supply and net employment is not a finite number. It is not a fixed pie. The U.S. doesn't have exactly 150 million jobs. That's not how it works. It is a machine of entrepreneurs, job creators, innovators, and regulators that are bit by bit pulling the levers of the economy to either create net more jobs or net less. It's not finite. Clearly. I'm like, the easy way to look at it is like, well, how many jobs existed in the US 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago? So instead, the question really is the US intentional in recruiting immigrants that are net job creators? Another way to then look at it really quantitatively at a macro lens is over the last year, in the time span where Trump's administration really intentionally lowered the rate of immigration, unemployment went up from 2.7 to 4.1%. Meaning we lowered the number of immigrants in the US, and yet the number of unemployed people went up. It's the exact opposite of all the rhetoric on the campaign trail would have claimed. I think the way to really then quantify the kind of the key levers that statistically immigrants are more likely to thrive at, it is that higher likelihood of being a company builder or an innovator, both of which are the two primary levers to drive new job creation, and at the same time, a driver of demand of the supply that other businesses and individuals are creating. I know that's a little heady, but it really is. It's the clearest way to debunk the myth that there are X number of jobs in the US, and if you remove 1 million immigrants, there will be 1 million more jobs for natural-born citizens. And that is statistically not the case, as proven out over the last year. So here's one more that I don't think this one will be too heady. It's back to, I want to continue to root my advocacy and care for the immigrant, not just in philosophical or humanitarian terms, because I get that that's it's kind of the tack that Democrats have historically taken, and it's remained divisive. And instead, another one is actually just point really directly at, hey, right now, the most important issue in the polls is affordability. So let's talk about how immigrants affect affordability. Same thing. The data shows that in the core industries that drive your and my consumption, agriculture, manufacturing, jobs that are disproportionately manned by immigrants, it is the fact that they are in those industries accepting wages that are lower than you and I would be interested in. What does that materially mean for your and my pocketbook? Let's just look at groceries. Once again, the price of eggs, the things that in the last election cycle mattered most. If the US didn't have the immigrant employment base, your and my groceries would go up by $800 to $1,000 next year. Clean and simple. Another one that I've heard a lot, and I'm like, oh, it kills me that there's just no evidence to back this up, is that immigrants are taking our housing supply. The first reason that one kind of kills me is there is a 2-decade-long structural issue in the US caused by overregulation that has led to a egregious 5 million housing unit shortfall in the United States that in no way can get pinned on immigrants. That is a structural political mistake that we are paying for. And that happens in the halls of power, not at our border. But even then, let's still look at if kind of the key immigrant populations that Trump is trying to remove left our nation, it's estimated that your and my housing costs might drop by $2,000 to $3,000 to purchase a new home, about call it a $400,000 to $500,000 home. But at the same time, if we lost the 30 to 40% workforce in the construction industry that are those immigrants, your and my costs, once again, would have dropped by maybe $2,000 to $3,000. On a $400,000 house, without that employment base, would skyrocket by $30,000 to $50,000. So whenever I hear a politician say they're taking our jobs and they're taking our homes, a United States without immigrants means the house might cost $2,000 less because of shrinking demand, but the developmental cost would grow by 30 to 50. So we'd save $2,000 and we'd have to spend 30 to 50. I'm like, it's just the math's not there. The math's not there. Oh, it's not there. It kills me. It totally kills me. So I'm going to summarize real quick. What I'm trying to make the case for is that an economist looking at this scenario would ask the question, is a demographic or a population a net job creator, driving innovation, paying into our tax base more than they're drawing, and are they driving down costs on the kind of the lower paying part of the payroll spectrum? And in each case, it's unequivocal. It's like, yes, that is the exact way that immigrants directly impact your and my pocketbook. With all that said, I hear myself say it, and it's like, I still wonder if all the evidence will convince a couple dear friends that maybe have their minds made up, or they have a feeling about it that's hard to combat. And I think, therefore, the solutions that I think about, that I wish I was seeing coming out of Washington, D.C., were actually structurally creating new systems to alter our immigration process, not just to close our border from undocumented immigrants. I'm in favor of that. But to make the case to Americans that, hey, our immigration system has one goal, and that's to help the rest of us achieve the American dream. People to afford a house, afford quality health care and not be riddled by medical debt, to help our kids get a great education, for them to buy a house. Like, man, it's people to afford groceries. Because that is all that will matter in the midterms and the 2028 presidential election. I wish that a candidate could look you in the eyes and say, hey, I'm actually going to re-rig the entire immigration system to serve you and help you achieve the American dream. Not them, you. Because you're the one voting. And I want it to be really clear that this isn't just a humanitarian effort out of the sacrifice of like the everyday American. It's like, no. These immigrants are going to make the U.S. better, and they're going to make your life better. And here's the way that we're going to institutionalize that. It's ideas I'm not coming up with. The first one is actually, it's called a merit-based point system. Just like the one that exists in Canada and the UK and Australia, like fairly more progressive nations than our own, where right now in the US, the lion's share of immigrants that are accepted, short-term visa, green cards, and ultimately citizenship, come through pathways that are either a lottery system or that they are sponsored by a family member that's already in the US. Which for me, I hear that and I'm like, I loosely get it. I'm sure their ability to assimilate, to get into a good job is heightened if they already have a family member here. There's got to be data behind that. But even for myself, it feels a bit arbitrary. It's like, are we getting the best and brightest? Are we getting the ones that are going to create all these amazing jobs? Or are we just kind of, it's a lottery. We'll see if we get lucky. And then you leave. Okay, then there's specific visas for agriculture and construction and Medicare and medical care and the H-1B for kind of that high tech. A point-based system standardizes it all and actually has a really clear scorecard that every American can look at and vote against if they don't like it. The data would show the point-based system should recruit. It's kind of a clear persona. It's someone that isn't 50 or 60 years old and is going to ultimately draw on a lot of the U.S. entitlement system that is already defaulting. We want to recruit folks that are young and hungry, ideally in their 20s or 30s. Ideally came here for grad school, already proficient in English, ready to hit the ground running and start creating value day one. In the same way that if you were a business owner, you'd want to recruit someone that's ready to plug and play. And then extra points, if anything, should be weighted towards the sectors that we most need filled by the best and brightest. It's STEM again. Man, it's all the critical technologies that we need to win. AI, biotech, autonomous vehicles, semiconductors, those are the people we need. And we have massive shortages. This is not the case that, oh my gosh, if we bring an extra brilliant AI engineer, it's too many. They're going to take your job. It's like, no, massive shortage. Look at what's going on in the whole semiconductor manufacturing, a massive shortage. It is the primary reason that Biden's IRA bill isn't actually getting rolled out. It's not because we don't have the money. It's not because we don't have the land. It's not even because we don't have the energy. It's because we don't have the people who know how to do it. We need to recruit them. And on that point system, they need to get disproportionately higher points so they can come here and help you and I by making sure that we win the AI arms race. That the semiconductors, which are just the chips in your phone and your computer and your car, that they're amazing, they're built here, and they're cheap. A point-based system could even adjust. Hey, in 2026, I know the couple key sectors we need to be recruiting for, but man, if that changes in 5 years, adjust the point-based system. Let's get the right people for the right time. We have a rapidly changing demographic crisis, and there will be an entire generation requiring a whole lot more medical care in their latter years. It's estimated that we're going to have a 3 to 4 million person shortfall in industries like hospice and basic medical care for our senior citizens. Let's adjust the point-based system and optimize for that. I think the other ones that are simple are, I've always been such a huge fan of this. I've heard it described as, man, we should be stapling a green card on every graduate student in the hyper important fields. So even if it's like, hey, if you're applying for immigration for the first time, you did grad school in China, India, Europe, wherever, apply. If you got a lot of points, you're going to get in. But man, if you spent the time to do an entire graduate degree at Stanford, the last thing we want to do is send you back. We want you to stay here and build here and win here. It's that idea that, man, if you're a student and you want to study liberal arts, theater, you're welcome to. But if you want to stay, if you want to be guaranteed a green card, you're going to want to study the key industries that are outlined, that are defined already. The only other ones, same thing, I think these should feel really simple, is if you're an immigrant and you want to come in and you run a business, own a business that already has invested X amount into the US and created 10 to 100 jobs more than you yourself require, that's another simple one for me. I can imagine it maybe feels like, they're purchasing their green card. I'm like, hey, if they're creating 10 jobs for every immigrant that they bring with them, it's still a no-brainer. The last one that is actually, I've read up a little bit more recently, is the idea that, yes, this should be happening at the federal level, but there should be a state-by-state ability to optimize for their needs and have their own quota, or maybe even their own point-based merit system. That, man, if you're in a city like Detroit and you want to revitalize your automotive industry, you want a different skill set in the immigrants that you're recruiting than Silicon Valley, which is different than Hollywood, which is, man, different than Atlanta or Wall Street in New York. I think that's the other one that just, I like to take that lens of like, if I treat the US like a really well-run business, I don't just want HR making all these kind of centrally planned decisions around, we need 27 engineers next year because there's a formula. It's like, hey, let's actually let the head of engineering decide. Let's let the head of sales decide. They know better than we do. Same thing. Each state governor and administration knows what their state needs. I'd love to kick that authority down to the state level, but using that same quantitative system so that the leadership in DC can say, hey, we did change the system. We kept our borders secure. We really, even though the rate of incarceration and violent crime is 2 to 3 times less amongst immigrants, I know that line doesn't do as much. Ultimately, our borders should be borders. They shouldn't just be wide open. There should be a freaking fence. But at the same time, I long for a day where every American knows, hey, that new immigrant that moved into the house next door from me, because of our system as a nation, we're recruiting the best people. I'm thrilled that they're an American. I'm thrilled that they opted to come here and build with us and build around our values and our culture of inclusion and freedom and plurality. Man, I wish that there was a pride that ultimately does need to be grounded on a system that every American can understand that, hey, our immigration system is intentional and it serves you, the everyday natural born citizen. It's to help you achieve the American dream while they do as well. So that's all I've got. If you've made it this far, as always, I'd love to hear what you think. And yeah, send it to a friend or two. And I'm curious how much this feels partisan or if it just feels like, I don't know, this is American. That's my goal. I think I'm just so exhausted with the partisanship right now that I believe there are solutions that exist that just feel fundamentally American and fundamentally focused on helping you achieve the American dream. So, another episode down. Thanks for listening and see you next week.